Stuff. Okay, so happy March the 13th, introducing outcomes, themes and topics. Today we're bringing to you the New Age Care Quality Standards Series, webinar number 2. My name's Michelle Wickie and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at AusMed. I should say I'm delighted to be the Chief Customer Officer at AusMed because I am. We've got a great turnout today, some internal people and lots of external people, customers and yet to be customers one day. And it's really our pleasure and an honour for us to bring this new content and adjustments for our practice to you guys. So I'm thrilled to introduce our distinguished speaker for today's webinar. Zoe Yule is the head. Oh, Zoe, I don't think I updated my title. Head of Community at AusMed. Okay, Zoe's expertise lies in cultivating collaborative environments within the healthcare sector. Today, she's going to guide us through the second webinar in this series on strengthened standards, the New Age Care Quality Standards, and the landscape, what's evolving, what needs to happen, and how you can execute excellence in your practice. So join with me in extending a warm welcome to Zoe. I'll tidy up my intro next time. I'm so sorry, Zoe.
That's lovely. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Welcome to our second webinar as part of the Strengthened Aged Care Quality Standards rollout series. Really delighted to present to you again today. As Michelle said, I've got a clinical background in intensive care and also love of education and regulation. So I've built, I guess, quite an in-depth background of the Australian healthcare sector over the 10 plus years at AusMed. So to bring together high quality clinical care, education and regulation, this is my dream. So really thrilled to be with you all today. I'm presenting this webinar on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, so I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge the impact that they have on our learning practices. Okay, so what we're going to cover today in our webinar. First up, we'll review our timeline. We've got an exciting new tool to share with you. I'm going to give you a little break from hearing from me and pass you over to Will for a brief demo of our gap analysis tool. There's a little wave from Will. Then we'll get into, I guess, what I feel is the real meaty bit of the webinar, where we're going to look at the structure of each standard in more detail, specifically how outcomes will be assessed. So some really important content there. And then we'll finish up by saying, how do you apply this into your own practice? And a recap of some simple next steps, which we're recommending providers take during the months of March. Okay, so hopefully all of your plans to implement the strengthened standards are well underway by now. If you haven't got a copy of this timeline, if you haven't printed it out, tab the PDF, please do so. So what it is a rollout of AusMed support. So all of the key changes that we are actioning in our rollout plan across content and software and of course support. But we've also aligned that with you, so provider action. So everything marries up nicely and the goal is to keep us all on track, calm and well prepared for our July 1 rollout. So good news, where are we at AusMed? Well, we're ahead of schedule, a lovely place to be, feels fantastic. We released our first module, so real key milestone for us achieved on the 4th of March. This is a 30-minute general module on the strengthened standards. So it's fabulous. I've had a lot to do with it, but also viewed it through the learner's eyes and really pleased to be able to bring that to you nice and early. Having this ready for you now means that we can give learners plenty of time to make sure that everyone is across these standards. So we've got 7 general modules, so that specifically look at each standard. They're well underway. I've just reviewed the script for our standard 5 module. It's excellent. That's a huge part of the standards. And really excited to keep updating you each webinar with where we're at. Lots of things ahead, of course. We'll have an activity on the Aged Care Act, tiny asterisks on when that will be. We anticipate it's during the month of June. Oh. All good. Thanks for promptly muting yourselves. Not a problem there. Lots of exciting things. As I said, we'll keep you updated. And I'm going to go through a couple of our LMS features, which we'll have released by June 1 towards the end of this session. Let's focus a little bit now on you though. So let's take a look at some of the key provider activities that hopefully have been completed or at the tail end of being completed, and what we're suggesting now for March. So first things first, we really recommend that your general gap analysis and planning to help identify those general training requirements really should be complete, or as I said, very close to being completed. So many providers that have undertaken this step are already rolling out our general module. We've got a large provider commencing a widespread rollout of our new module on Monday, next Monday, the 18th. So undertaking this general analysis phase will also help you identify, what are your in-house modules? What have you created to date that will need updates to references, terminology, links? Hopefully you've all read the new standards, but we're not referring to the consumer or the client anymore. We are referring to the older person or the older adult. So just those basic updates to your content will really demonstrate best practice and demonstrate to your learners, to your staff, that you really understand these new standards. I guess the start of March also marks when we recommend shifting your gap analysis to a more detailed, more in-depth approach to really get into those nitty-gritty specific clinical gaps, particularly around the high risk and high prevalent clinical and care skills. As I mentioned, Standard 5 is massive. So keeping in mind that there will be significant educational implications that arise from Standard 5, we recommend that you're in March undertaking this aspect of your gap analysis so that you can start planning that more specific targeted education down the track to your specific learning cohorts, which I'll cover towards the end, a little recap. So that's to date our key tool, but I'm also really excited to share with you something that we've recently developed. So I can see many familiar faces on the webinar. I know many of you have been involved with implementing aged care quality standards before, even NSQHS standards. If you haven't, I'm sure you know by now it's a lot of work, but it is a team effort. And what we've seen in the past month is that some providers perhaps aren't thinking about it as a coordinated approach and utilising some key working parties and key expertise within the organisation. So what we've put together is a sample project plan, and it shows how the rollout can be overseen by an overarching committee. That's your blue banner at the top, and then supported by up to 5 discrete working groups or working parties. So you'll be able to, when we send out a recording of the webinar, we'll make sure we attach that tool. Otherwise, please make sure you visit our website and grab yourself a copy of that helpful resource. Speaking of helpful resources though, I've mentioned our gap analysis tool, and it really is valuable. We created it, and it's actually been really well received and requested by so many providers. We've designed it to support you. It is to help you respond to those learning and development implications of the standards, and it's a really fabulous tool that I'm really pleased to see be used so widespread. So I'm going to hand over to Will briefly for a quick demo. If you haven't requested a copy of the tool, please make sure you do and take on Will's demo to. Here we go. We can see your screen. Thanks, Will.
That's good. Sorry if I took over the screen. I didn't think it would do that. I was a bit trigger happy preparing the slide, the document. But can everybody see this Excel file? Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So I won't spend too long on this. Some of you on the call I can see as well, we've already gone through this in detail over an hour session. That's available if you'd like to book in some time. We've got 4 or 5 people offering those in AusMed, here at AusMed at the moment. But in October last year, I'm Will, I'm the CEO here at AusMed. And Zoe and Renee put to me, we need to be ahead of this, these new strengthened standards that are coming through, and we really can't be waiting for when the department or the commission release the documentation around it. We need to get ahead. So we started working on this in October last year. I think everybody felt we'd almost completed it by the early December, and then of course the final draft came out on the 15th, and we weren't at Christmas parties at the end of the year. We're mostly just reworking this. In January, when the guidance material came out, we did another review, and I suppose where we got to was we just felt that this was so useful and valuable that we knew that providers were going to be pressed for time to conduct a gap analysis of their own training landscape. So in that working group of the training area, there's about 600 hours of both Zoe and Renee in this, and wouldn't it be great to be able to give that back to all of our customers, and then just more broadly people working in the sector trying to genuinely take this as an opportunity to improve care of the older person. So we polished it up, and that's what document you see in front of you now. So this is free. We're making it available with that intention, and I'm going to give you a quick demo of how it works. When you open it up, you'll see this sheet here, the overview sheet. Gives you a little bit of information about the purpose of the tool and how to use it, but it also provides some step-by-step instructions on what to do. I'll give you a brief tour of how to step through each of those. So it starts with a general analysis where we look at each standard and the key concepts related to the outcomes sitting underneath each standard. And then over on the columns G and H and I, you have the opportunity to basically indicate whether you deem something, the risk level of that key concept or outcome to be in your organisation, and what the priority level is. You could include any notes. For example, we've had recent incidences in this area. The reason why we've linked it to the key concepts as it associates with the guidance material is that if you're looking at, say, outcome 2.4 risk management, and the key concept is enterprise risk, you can grab that guidance material documentation and go back and look at what's actually covered, or what's meant by that concept of enterprise risk. This is a general review of the standards, and it's probably best to be done at that blue box level that Zoe talked about, the working group overall, or the project committee. But then what we've done, and this is where the absolute gold is, I'll actually start here, is you can include a list of your existing modules. So in AusMed's case, we included the list of the 1,200 modules that we have in our library, when they were last updated, when they were published. And then these are just example names of organizations, but imagine they were list titles of modules. You then tab to this specific requirements review, and you can link your existing library modules to potential educational requirements that may stem from those outcomes. So what do I mean by that? What Zoe and Renee have done is looked at all of the documentation around each outcome statement and tried to anticipate or conceive of what a content request might look that's corresponding to the underlying action statement. So for example, in outcome 1.1, person-centered care, action statement 1.1.3, we believe that there may be a training requirement that stems from that action statement, such as recognising the rights of older adults. How does that show up at AusMed? In a few months' time, people are emailing us saying, what have you got on recognising the rights of the older adults? And we want to be on the front foot saying, yes, we've got this exact module. We've looked at it. It absolutely meets the needs outlined in outcome 1.1 and action item 1.1.3. So if you were to imagine column F is potential module titles or training requirements that we think may be identified as a result of that outcome statement, what you can do is then work through this list and say whether you have content on that, whether you have it but it needs updating, or whether you don't have content. You can indicate the risk level to your organizations. This is specific to your organization, your service environment, your workforce, your clients or consumer groups. Whether you believe that if that training requirement to go unmet, what the risk level would be, high, moderate, low, therefore whether it's a priority. And you can also link it to the existing modules that you've put somewhere else, that in that other sheet, such that you know now what the list of modules are that needs to therefore be updated. Once you complete all of this is, I'll just show you one last part. Zoe mentioned standard 5's a big component. It absolutely is if you haven't read it yet. it's effectively concerned with all of the clinical needs of the older person. And there's 75 potential training items that we've identified in Standard 5. So really you'll probably spend most of your time there compared to, say, residential community, which we've only identified 5. So my view would be this is definitely not an exaggeration of what the potential training requirements could be. In fact, it's probably an underestimation. If you look at something like medication safety, I think 5.3, we've identified 14 topics. But there's some that are definitely missing here, in my view. They're just not specifically referenced, but they're part of a kind of medication care need or setting. So once you fill all that in, ta-da, it'll roll up to a dashboard. You can put your logo here. If you click print and select PDF, it'll all fit on one page. We've done all that formatting for you. It'll give you a summary of what you believe your general risk profile is and priority areas are relative to the all standards. The saying I'm enjoying using here is, how do you eat an elephant? The answer is one bite at a time. Obviously this is a traffic light system. You'll want to focus on those red areas first. But my 2 favorite charts are these ones here in the bottom right corner. So this second section is the educational activity analysis. And I'll just zoom in. As a result of that specific training requirement review, we'll identify for you the number of items that are both high risk and high priority. So in this case, we're saying it's 19 out of 142, but we'll also give you a breakdown of what the risk profile looks like based on the standards. So you can see in this example, in this organisation, Standard 6 has a mix of low risk and not a risk item. But if we look, actually, Standard 2 seems to be one of the higher risk areas, with all but maybe 1 or 2 items being a risk of some form, low, medium, or high. And then obviously you can just see the quantum, the sheer amount of training items that sit under Standard 5, and in this example, 28 being high risk. So yeah, this is a really significant thing for us to offer. We're really pleased to just share this. If it leads to better healthcare, better outcomes, better care of the older person in Australia, it's absolutely a good thing and worthwhile doing. It's no skin off our nose. The more people that have this, the better. So please feel free to share it around. And yeah, we'll send you a copy after this webinar. Back to you, Zoe.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Will. I'm so pleased that we can share this tool, and I really see this making a difference. Just stepping back for a moment, what are we trying to do? We are trying to move regulation, the rules, the law, into practice, and we're using our powerful vehicle of education to do that. But it's a big job. We need good tools. We need a good process in order to achieve that outcome. But it's no mean feat what you're all doing. Let's not forget where this need to change regulation came from. It comes from off the back of the Royal Commission: abuse, neglect, poor care. So, we are here to support you in this big task, but this very important task of moving regulation and translating that into actual better care. And I know for sure I'm going to look back at this part of my career and see it as a real highlight. So there you go. There's just a big picture, think about what we're really doing here. So just confirming everyone can see my screen again. Thumbs up, beautiful. If you haven't, and I know Austin's put the link in the chat, there's the QR code to grab a copy of that tool. Okay, so we've covered some practical details, timelines, tool. Thank you for the demo, Will. What I want to now switch focus on is a real in-depth look at the structure of the standards or of each standard. Why we need to understand the significance of outcomes, because that is the enforceable element. Outcomes are what will be the focus of an audit. So we need to go deep into understanding, what exactly are they? Okay, so here's the structure of each standard. There are 4 key elements. We have an intent, an expectation statement, and within an outcome, we have an outcome statement and actions. Outcomes are the enforceable element, meaning, they're the core of each standard. So every standard begins with an intent. Depending on the standard, the intent can vary between 100 and 300 words approximately. What it does is it describes the provider's responsibilities. It describes the person's specific needs. And how I'd encourage you to think about that is, what does success look like? If this standard is working, what does that look like? So if we look at an example from Standard 5, the intent is showing us success. It's saying that I can still participate in an activity that I find enjoyable, that gives me purpose and meaning as a result of my clinical care being in good enough health. So my care needs are met. Therefore, I can continue to engage in the things that give my life meaning and that matter to me. So it's success. It's looking at what success looks like. The next element is our person-centered expectation standard. I honestly love this part of the standard because it really sets the expectation. We hear from the voice of an older person. We hear what exactly do they want to receive, what matters to them. So thinking about Standard 3, the care and services I receive are safe and effective. They respect my needs. I want to take risks. This is what matters to me. In my case, I honestly hear the voice of my grandmother. She died at 94 from heart failure. I can hear her voice saying to me, Zoe, this is what matters to me. This is the expectation. This is how I want to be cared for. So I think this element of the standard is really, really powerful. And then we have our outcomes. So very technical, there are 34 outcomes. They are the enforceable element. However, just very briefly touch on registration categories. If you're a category 6 registration category, you'll be assessed against 33 outcomes. There's 34 outcomes in total, but we've got a 4A and 4B because one applies to home in the home setting and the other in a residential setting. So I know we in even some of the Commission's guidance material, we've got a 34 and a 33. There are a total of 34 outcomes, but if you're in a category 6, you'll be assessed on the 33. So just by a technicality to really clear on that point. What I want to really focus on here is that there are 2 parts of the enforceable element. So 2 parts to our outcomes. The first is an outcome statement, and then our actions are attached. Let's start with the outcome statement though. This is critical. An outcome statement is what a provider will be assessed against. And for that reason, they are explicit in nature. They truly set forth what exactly the provider needs to know, show, or do. So for example, this outcome statement leaves no room for doubt. Outcome 1.2, dignity, respect, and privacy. The provider delivers care and services in a way that is free from all forms of discrimination, abuse, and neglect, treats older people with dignity and respects the personal privacy of older people. And we have a statement referring to the Statement of Rights as well. So outcome statements are very explicit and as I said, leave no room for doubt. Each outcome also includes attached actions. So I like to think about these as a stair step, basically. Actions are how a provider might demonstrate that they're stair-stepping towards achieving the desired outcome. So they're more practical in nature. They often have a reference to, get used to this term, implementing an effective system and effective process. So here in the action level, as Will demonstrated, sit a number of educational requirements. But why this is a team effort, why that committee tool matters, is because we need to also be ensuring our systems and processes are effective and that they match these outcomes as well. If we take an example of an action, you can see these ones are really quite specific. 7.1.4, older people have control over who goes into their room and when this happens. 7.15, older people can entertain visitors in privacy. in private. Others are a little bit more broad, and this is why they're practical in nature, because the actions are giving you room to tailor your response to your service, to your context. So a little bit more broad here. The relationship between older people, their family and carers is recognised and respected. Key point though is that outcomes will be the focus of an audit. So let's now take a look at the new audit process. All right, so firstly, the new audit methodology sits under the new regulatory model. So we're not just seeing one or two changes to auditing, we're seeing quite a raft of changes. And we know that for this to take effect, we need the New Aged Care Act to pass the parliamentary passage. It's still a bill, which means it's in a draft exposure form, but once it is through, achieving the outcomes of the standards will be mandated. So, what's that telling us? It is saying that those outcomes and the outcome statement specifically will be the focus of an audit. And this is where that evidence gathering process is going to really focus on. So in order to demonstrate conformance with a standard, auditors will be evaluating specifically how well a provider demonstrates that they are continually achieving those outcomes. It means a provider will need to, and I'll show you the specific example in the tool, you will need to clearly describe how you meet each outcome statement. So again, just reiterating, outcomes are the enforceable element. The outcomes attached to an outcome provide guidance about how you can get there. There's that stair-stepping approach. So you'll need to demonstrate how you're achieving an outcome. The actions can support you to state some examples of what you're doing and how you're getting there. So this is literally how you're going to do that. What you're looking at here is the pre-audit preparation tool. So it is the specific area where you'll need to reflect and document your response to that key question. So you can see here is that key question. This is an example from Standard 5. Describe how the provider meets this outcome. What's the outcome that they're referring to? 5.2, here is our outcome statement. So you'll be completing a response to this question, answering how you're meeting this outcome. Next to this outcome are the specific actions attached to that outcome, where you can use this to try and articulate, talk to the evidence that you're meeting these requirements. So the ability to really clearly describe what you're doing to meet this outcome will be critical. So this is why we're going deep into what are the structures of a standard, how do they vary, so that you can see that our outcome is here on our left-hand side, our actions sit alongside them, but conformance or demonstrating that you're meeting the standard is dependent upon you answering the question of how are we meeting this outcome. Let's keep working through this. So how will they be assessed? We've got some changes to the grading terminology as well. So we're not talking about compliant or non-compliant anymore. I'll show you the new grades in a second, but the background to this change is quite interesting. The regulatory approach is changing. The term that the Commission describes is a more relational or relationship-based regulation. So the goal of the new grades are to try and better differentiate between performance. There's 4 grades, and it's setting up room for continuous improvement. From the reading that I've done, what I can share is my understanding is that a grading will occur at the outcome and standard level. meaning, as I've just showed you in the previous slide, every outcome will be assessed against, and I believe receive a grade, and then an overall grading occurs. What that actually looks like is TBC. So I'm talking to the green here. That is what I believe will occur, but the guide for what exceeding looks like is still yet to be confirmed. This is a draft document that we're looking at. But what is clear, what is in place that I don't believe will change are these 4 audit grading descriptions. So you can see we're now talking about conformance or non-conformance. We've got 2 different categories, a major non-conformance, and what that is are frequent gaps. They're unknown knowns. A provider doesn't know or isn't able to recognise that there are significant gaps in the quality of service that they're providing. These gaps will have a significant impact. They can't be rectified quickly, and therefore we're looking at a major non-conformance, not effective in building systems and processes. A minor non-conformance, I'm looking at the orange here, are some gaps but not systemic. And if there are gaps, they may be isolated, they're known by the provider, they're low risk, low impact, and there is work occurring to try and rectify those gaps. Conformance at the blue level is where a provider can demonstrate that for an outcome, an effective system and process has been established, implemented, and is being reviewed continuously. I can't give you any more information on exceeding. That is all I can find. I find it interesting that we can set the bar for what maybe poor or average looks like, but exceeding is to be determined. So as more becomes available on what exceeding looks like, I will make sure that we share that with you. But you know, as I say, my understanding is that exceeding would have to be that every outcome of those 33 on those occasions is met with a perfect response. Okay, so the actual audit process is changing a little bit as well, and I think you'll really like this bit. The audits will be now conducted over 3 phases, and it's a mix of desktop or virtual work and on-site activities. The really interesting bit, though, is that every audit has to start with an RFI. An RFI is a request for information. So we cannot get to stage 2 of an audit delivery where the on-site work commences without a stage 1 occurring. What does that mean? No spot checks, no unannounced visits. You will be communicated in advance that an audit is occurring, and there is a really great opportunity to start preparing and building your evidence of how you're going. In a little bit more detail, these 3 phases, you'll get the slide, so I won't go through every point here, but we've got a mix of activities, a range of formats, as I mentioned, desktop and on-site. I guess the key phase that is most relevant to you all here is our stage 2, the actual audit delivery, where evidence gathering occurs, and that's been stated as paper or electronic documents, including what you can see: strategies, reports, policies, procedures, care minutes, progress notes, etc. But just reiterating, we cannot have stage 2 of an audit that occurs mostly on site, but some desktop activity as well, without having a stage 1 audit preparation where we send out our RFI off. Okay, when exactly do providers need to meet these new obligations under the standards? When will this auditing commence? The second part of that question, I cannot say. I'm not sure the Commission can actually say at what date they will begin auditing. But what Janet Anderson has said, and this was in a webinar on the 6th of Feb, I think it was, is that make no bones about it, there is an expectation that providers are compliant from day 1. So as soon as we have our New Aged Care Act passed, there will be no grace period, there will be no transition arrangement. We need to be ready. So in that webinar, she went on to say this is how you can be ready. And what is should be very reassuring to you all is that demonstrating that staff training is well underway before July 1 will be seen as a measure of progress that a provider is making towards full implementation of the standards. So yes, it is a team effort. We need to be looking at our systems, making sure we have effective processes, but education and training on the new quality standards, and as we're saying, that talks to the topics and specific requirements from within them, will be seen favourably as a measure that the provider is making good progress towards that full implementation. Okay, so, talking about education, I've said, we've shared on numerous occasions now that, our assessment is that there are key educational requirements stemming from the standards. We've heard the Commissioner say that, staff training and seeing that underway will be seen positively, and that outcomes matter. Today we've looked at, the specific elements of a standard and that outcomes are enforceable. So we know we need education, but what education, to who, why, and most importantly, if outcomes are the enforceable element, what's being audited, then how do we as L&D teams incorporate that into our practice? How do we assign or create education with that desired outcome in mind? So the good news is that there's actually a theory, a really, really great, simple and effective learning theory called outcomes-based learning, that if you attended my session at our Elevate conference, I delivered a presentation on the new provider governance requirements. This probably isn't new, but it's a really simple cycle. What outcomes-based learning is: planning, implementing, and evaluating education with the desired outcome or desired result in mind. So from the start, we are planning and implementing education with a desired outcome in mind. A couple of key principles of outcome-based learning, and it's simple. I'm sure you'll be nodding and thinking, yes, this just makes sense. We need to deliver targeted education. That is why we recommend undertaking a needs assessment or a gap analysis. We need to specifically plan an activity based on a clear need. We need to know why we're implementing a particular activity or education. Donna Wright says this, we can't spray and pray. We can't assign all this training to everyone and, cross our fingers and hope that our compliance rates will remain high and hopefully the desired outcomes will be achieved. It's not going to work. We're going to disengage learners, they'll try and game the system. Nothing's going to be absorbed. It's just a waste of resources, time and money. What we're really advocating for and what outcomes-based learning preaches is that, similar to having the right person on the right bus at the right time for the right reason, on the right route, etc. With education, we've got to have it assigned to the right target audience for the right reason, to achieve the right outcome. And really simply, when it comes to evaluating, when we know the desired outcome in mind from the start, evaluation is easy. We know what we want to achieve from a particular educational activity or group of activities. But it encourages us to think of a key question. When we're evaluating, if not, why not? If we didn't achieve the desired outcome, then why not? And this is where your continuous improvement plans come in, because if you're not seeing the desired result from a particular initiative, education or non-education, then really thinking about why it didn't work and putting that into your continuous improvement plan, that is demonstrating continuous improvement. So really simple cycle, and we'll keep building on this in future webinars and other resources that we're developing. Okay, we're getting towards the end, so I just want to recap that, you've probably seen this slide. We talked about it in webinar 1 before, and it's our recommended approach to training. Outcomes-based learning underpins AusMed's approach to rolling out education on the standards. This is why we are suggesting our two-pronged approach. So we've got phase 1 training that we're saying is, on the standards, general education, short, sharp, 3 months focused on general education relating to the standards. Why? Because we've got probably large knowledge gaps amongst a large target audience. We want to have the outcome of having a general improvement of knowledge of the standards across all staff. And therefore, our evaluation, it's got to be a general evaluation. So that is why we're suggesting reporting on training across the 7 standards. So general, phase 1, general, we're looking at training on the standards. Phase 2, though, is our targeted standards. So thinking back to our gap analysis, part 1 of our gap analysis is understanding what are our general, requirements for education. Part 2, if you think back to Will's demonstration, we've got specific actions where we've identified those educational requirements or implications. And this is what's going to feed into your phase 2 planning. That is why we're recommending in the month of March, you complete that high risk, high prevalent, even if you're just focusing on standard 5 aspect of your gap analysis, because this is what will matter. After audits commence, from July onwards, we're going to need to show that targeted education is closing those key knowledge, skill and practice gaps. This is where we recommend that internal reporting gets a bit more specific, that you're able to report on specific gaps, specific initiatives, activities, and the results of those activities to a particular outcome. So if you think to outcomes-based learning, targeted education, having the right person on the right bus, this is where it matters, because in phase 2, there will be a lot of educational requirements that you identify. Many of those may be high risk. So targeted education that drills into a particular need, that is to a particular target audience, will really increase the effectiveness of your phase 2 training that we're recommending from July onwards. Really briefly, but really excited to share. I know many of you know this already, but we're rolling out features, of course, in our LMS to support with your rollout. The first, again, our LMS is also underpinned by outcomes-based learning theory. So to make it easy for you, particularly in that phase 2 when you're delivering targeted education, make it really helpful so that you can find and then deliver targeted education. You'll be able to search our content library by outcome. And the next feature, again, really exciting, is a reporting upgrade. So, we all now know that outcomes are the enforceable element. They will be the focus of an audit. I've shared with you that example from Standard 5 where you're going to specifically need to reflect on how you're meeting that outcome statement. Through our LMS, you'll be able to generate a standards report at an outcome level. So still at a standards level, that will still be available, but you'll be able to obtain learning records at both that standard and outcome level. So, the aim of this feature is to really help you during that auditing phase to answer those key questions. Describe how the provider meets this outcome, and you'll be able to use this learning record as supporting documentation and evidence of how you're getting there. Okay, so just finish up by just trying to simplify everything with 5 key items, which is what we recommend if you're not already doing that, you try and work through this month. Our next webinar is on the 9th of April, so nothing like a bit of a deadline to support things. We recommend that you finish a general gap analysis and start assigning general training. Complete your high-risk gap analysis to allow you to start planning that phase 2, where we're really looking at targeted education. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend that you begin reading some of the material, the draft material, and especially the audit methodology document. There's a link for it in a moment on audits. It's critical. Things are changing, and it's really important that we're across it. So that's the key document. The website is to the consultation, the sector consultation part of the Commission's website. There's a number of key resources there, particularly this one though, the audit methodology, evidence mapping and templates. We are using this, all of our education team know all of these documents. They are using that to actually develop our education. When we're writing the script for our modules, we are specifically referring to the evidence mapping and provided guidance material to ensure that we are developing this education with the outcome in mind. We're practicing what we preach, and having an awareness of this from the get-go, I think will really support you in your practice as well. Save the date after Easter, come back refreshed. We've got our next webinar, and we'll start to look at specific examples from standards 1 to 4 about how we can achieve that intended outcome. So, really starting to look at examples of how might we reflect and document on that question of, as a provider, how are we meeting those particular outcomes. And this is just our general page on the standards. You can look at all of the upcoming webinar dates, any new features that go live or new resources we post here. You can request a gap analysis tool. All of our practical support is there. And I think that covers it. So thank you all very much. I will just take a quick sip of water, hand over to you, Michelle, and then if there's any questions or anything unanswered from the chat, we'll take a quick look at it.
Beautiful timing, Zoe and Will. Nice work. Very impressed. 10 minutes to go for people with questions or early marks. So as Zoe's mentioned, the next webinar is the 9th of April. If you register, even if you can't make it, you'll get a recording of the webinar. So don't forget that for those that might be having holidays around that time or worried about being able to make that one, but register anyway, no matter what. Does anyone have any questions before we head off? Yeah, I can see a hand just looking. Oh, Pooja, hi.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you, Zoe. I don't think we've officially met.
I think it's only ever by email.
Probably only ever by email, yes.
We missed you at Elevate, Pooja. I think you got the dreaded COVID just before, didn't you?
Yes, I had the
naughty cough. Yeah.
I didn't want to spread it around. My question was really around the sort of like the gap analysis that you talked about and sort of measuring the risk profile. Do you have a key that sort of informs what's high risk, what's low risk, what's medium, or are you sort of leaving that open to interpretation?
Will, did that sit with you? Oh, sorry, Zoe, interrupting.
Yeah, I can kind of maybe give it, or maybe Zoe, you could talk about how we deem topics to be risky based on our approach to kind of, I suppose, content integrity overall. What is a high risk topic? What's a low risk topic?
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
want to talk to that?
Yeah, and specifically, Pooja, no, we haven't developed a key, but always, welcome feedback and definitely take a look at it. But I would be reluctant to provide a general key because the purpose of this tool, a gap analysis, has got to apply to your specific service. And your risk profile on a particular topic will be different to another provider's risk. So I think, as Will said, though, the way we approach it at AusMed, because obviously, we have a library of over 1,200 modules. We need to make sure that we are keeping them up to date and they have integrity. Honestly, anything that touches a patient, so a medicine, a dressing, a product, in my mind, is high risk. It's just a very, litmus test of, is this risky? a patient person, put my hospital hat, I'll take my hospital hat off. So high risk, medicine, anything with a medicine, anything that in the sector performance that came out, I think it was yesterday, you get the quarterly sector performance, any item that shows up there around the complaints and reportable incidents, high risk. Generally it's those involving a person. But with that being said, the environment can be as risky. I think a good guide for any of this is looking at the number of elements per standard, so the number of outcomes and the number of actions. Again, standard 5 is big, standard 2 is big. In the latest sector performance report that I just mentioned that came out this week, I think with the most amount of issues are now relating to standard, or it would be standard 2 in the new standards, but governance. And the red flag is that having good governance, good clinical governance in place mitigates the risk for others. So yes, I say if it touches a patient, it's high risk, but I also think standard 2 is a really critical one because that is where your systems and processes are in place. I hope I haven't answered too much like a politician here, but hopefully that's helpful for you, Pooja.
No, thank you. That was very helpful.
I might quickly just add a point as well. I think also wherever there's a high rate of legislative change, so either at a state level or a federal level, we kind of consider those high risk as well. So, for example, when mandatory reporting in childcare settings, lots and lots of regulation around that, changing constantly across the country. That would be on an annual review cycle at AusMed. It's always high risk, and then it's imagine the impact to the person if it's not administered properly. So, yeah, legislative change can also be a factor.
Medicines, the law, documentation. Yep. Hi, Jennifer. I can see your hand up as well.
I think Colleen was next.
I think Colleen first.
Colleen.
That's okay. I don't mind. Mine's a fairly easy question. I'm kind of hanging on every word that comes out of AusMed's mouth. My organization has asked me to start rolling out training on the new standards now, effectively actually 3 weeks ago. So I am hanging on everything that you guys put out because it's absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to do the training gap analysis because that tool is just fantastic. Can you recommend anything next onto that? Of course, I'm already registered in all the webinars, but what can I do to keep everybody happy?
Well, I'd be looking at that the committee tool, Colleen, and making sure that the overall structure for rolling out the standards within the organisation is top notch. You're doing a great job. You're leading on L&D. Make sure that you've got maybe the underlying structure to roll out the standards outside of your L&D scope is also on track and aligns.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Zoe.
Will,
did
you
you
have
have anything
to add?
Yeah. So I think obviously providers are of all different sizes, and that diagram with the 5 work streams, has a lot of different job roles in it. But in different, in smaller organizations, someone might be doing 2 or 3 of those job roles, and actually they're just singularly therefore leading whatever that may be. Maybe it's clinical care, maybe it's the dining experience, or one of those kind of more dedicated work streams. We broke those out because they do get specific mention in the standards, of all the areas, and that's why I kind of see them as important.
Yeah.
But I also think at that project level, it's the responsibility of the CEO and CFO to deal with the sentinel risks that the organisation faces, and this is one of those. And including the governing body, if that exists. I always think, why did the governing body reforms come out in December? Well, it's probably to be there so that they can support this actual change and the changes that stem from the Act in July. So they need to be engaged as well. And if that tool assists you to do that, I think that's helpful. And then maybe the last point is the Commission really does have some great resources. AusMed's trying to very much stay in its lane of we're here to help you with the educational implications of the strengthened standards. It's like, oh, we need an acronym for that soon, but that's kind of our remit. But Anchor Excellence has some really great resourcing on the policies and procedures front. They're running a kind of similar set of webinars. I think they're calling it the Sprint, and it's and they're not really intersecting with training, and we're not intersecting into that stream. So maybe you could reach out to Anchor Excellence, and we'd be happy to facilitate some connections there. But they've got great resourcing on those two deliberate work streams: policies like risk and governance, just policies, procedures, other areas, and then training being the other side.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much, Will. Thanks, Zoe.
Jen.
No worries.
Hi, Will, I hear you saying just now about the gap analysis. First of all, thank you very much. Very helpful. I'm nearly at the end. I heard that you said there's somebody that we could meet up. There's a couple of people that could meet up 1 hour to help us out or understand or have a look through that. So I'm just guessing, how can I tap into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can I get help?
Some of them are salespeople. I just got to warn you, but they actually are very experienced in this area, maybe ex-clinicians or other things like that, roles like that. But, Zoe is doing them, Renee's doing them, all of Michelle's team's doing it. For those that don't know, Michelle's also a very experienced clinician, working in L&D roles in aged care, acute care settings, general practice. And then we've also got Ronnie, who is also very experienced in that field as well. Natalie, Kiara, Abby, and I'm happy to jump on and help out as well. But I think like what we're going to be opening up, and maybe this will help you as well, Colleen, is a chance to just book that one-on-one session. Also, all free. We just want this to work. You don't have much time to get it right. If we can give you back hundreds and hundreds of hours of work because we've done that legwork for you, then how great is that for everybody, and definitely for our community. So just make a booking. That they'll open up as Zoe's got it there. We'll send out an email mid-March. It's that next box after the black line, book gap analysis coaching sessions, and then from mid-April we're also going to do training plan reviews. So if you've got a view on how you're going to address your July 1 onwards training plan, which is your high risk, high kind of prevalence or high priority topics, you can get a second opinion on that from AusMed's L&D people. We're always just trying to be, Rumpelstiltskin, turning straw into gold overnight for you, so you come back and maybe half the work's done, something like that, but at least an extra resource behind the scenes.
All right, that's time,
Thanks, Will.
folks. Nice wrap up, Will. I saw you watching that countdown before I cut you off with the hook around the neck. Really appreciate you guys attending. Thank you so much. Thanks to Zoe and Will for presenting today. We look forward to seeing you on the 9th of April, and have a productive 5 weeks until we get there, 4 weeks until we get there. Thanks for dialing in.
Thanks, everyone.